Cask ale is the lifeblood of the British beer industry and a vital part of our country's culture. It was only a few decades ago that it was all we drank in our pubs, but in the last decade or so it's been in serious, sometimes double-digit decline. The closure of our beautiful pubs and increasingly tight margins in beer all play their part, but there's also been a drop-off in interest in cask ale, especially among younger generations. Its reputation has been damaged by cliches about who drinks it and quality issues related to how hard it is to brew well and serve right. We've come to believe that cask ale at its best is the ultimate way to enjoy beer. We've fallen in love with our traditional pubs, styles, breweries and culture and hate to see it slowly falling apart. So we've decided to do something about it. 3 years ago we made a 5-part documentary exploring the British cask ale scene, through its rich history and traditions to the modern challenges and opportunities it faces. Inspired but also concerned about its future, in the last episode we came up with an ambitious plan. To lead a campaign to get cask recognised by UNESCO as intangible heritage. Since then we've been working hard behind the scenes to gather support and lobby politicians and interest groups. But we've also been collecting the evidence we'll need to present to UNESCO when the time comes. Evidence in the form that we know best. Film. So in association with some fantastic beer businesses, we're thrilled to present Series 2 of Keep Cask Alive. So far in this series we've largely talked about cask ale's rich heritage and how it makes hand-pulled pints a joyful thing to drink today. We think that's core to cask ale's appeal and future, but if we want it to be seen as relevant and exciting by the wider population, it's important that the beers we put through cask recognise what new drinkers want from their beer. We also think it's vital that cask ale can be found in great condition outside the traditional real ale settings. More than that, we think that cask ale needs to be at the heart of these more modern communities, just like it is in the pub. So this week we're visiting a beautiful 200-year-old brewery famous for its unique best bitter and authentic historical beers. But this brewery has also helped enable its local football team to become the first in the UK to pay its men and women's teams equally. On top of that, their sponsorship of Brighton and Hove Albion FC means that every match day, this incredible 30,000-seater Premier League stadium becomes the largest cask ale pub in the world. To start this episode, however, we're looking at how the cask ale industry can update the image of the liquid itself. And to do so, we're back at the Harvest. This time we're in Herefordshire, where hop merchant Charles Fareham is 15 years into a breeding programme that intends to bring bold, modern but complex flavours to the British cask brewing industry. The results in the last few years have been incredible and could mark a real change for both British hop farmers and lovers of great hoppy beer. So today we are back off to Charles Fareham, to Townend Farm, a place we've visited pretty much every year since the pandemic, because they're doing some really exciting things there. Not only have they been growing heritage English hops for decades, but they have been growing and indeed crossbreeding lots of exciting new varieties, including things like Harlequin, Olicana, Jester, Godiva, all this stuff that we've got very excited about. But today when we go there, we're going to be chatting to Buxton Brewery, who are there to look at this year's crop. Buxton have sort of led the way in terms of getting lots of exciting English hops into can, into cask, and into keg. So they're a great brewery to chat to about where we think British hops are heading, why we think that's super important for the future of cask, and indeed what we're expecting from this year's harvest. On arrival at Townend Farm, we were immediately handed some wellies and bundled onto a tractor, which took us past an orchard and out to a very special hop yard indeed, the first nursery of Charles Fareham's hop breeding programme and home to thousands of possible new varieties.
Do you reckon it's your first tractor ride doing?
What do you mean my first tractor ride?
Well.
I've ridden many a tractor at a hop yard.
First today.
That was the sketchiest. Before we started exploring, we caught up with Charles Fairham Technical Director Will to see how the breeding programme was developing, but first how the British hop industry had fared since we last visited in 2023. In some ways, I wish I hadn't asked.
So in 1870 there were 72,000 acres of hops grown in the UK, and we're down to about 1,500 now.
Right. So, it's a decimal point almost.
Yeah.
This has been a part of our culture for a significant period of time, pre-industrial revolution, almost pre-Reformation, pretty much. And yet it's come to this point where it's almost gone, and it's only people like you and some sort of independent farms in Kent and in Herefordshire.
45 of us.
45.
Yeah.
So it was 54 2 years ago when we last did something with you. So
the acreage has halved since COVID. It's horrendous.
Yeah.
However, we're really pushing hard on the use of British hops. Environmentally, British hops make a great argument. They use less CO2. We use less plant protection, less food miles of the hops actually going to the breweries, and we've got a lot of environmental protection schemes that go alongside the hops. What we see when we're making crosses is that the hops express their genes very widely. So from a single cross, we might end up with a hop that is a Fuggle type, or a Nelson Sauvin, or a Mosaic type. Within that same cross. So what we're looking for in our breeding program is we are looking for classic type hops to replace existing ones that will require less fertiliser, less fungicides and pesticides, perhaps higher yields, and that will help reduce the carbon footprint of those hops. But we're also looking for the new world aromas. We're not limiting ourselves in any way.
It sounds like it's very scientific or very agricultural in that, thousands of seeds from single plants, growing them all up like this to see, what survives. But at the end of the day, once it looks beautiful, the thing that you're doing is you're smelling and you're getting people to brew with it. So it's a very sensory and therefore very human process. So we need people with huge experience of these things to be doing it. And as hop farms close, we're losing people with that experience.
The infrastructure around hop growing in this country is collapsing. You mentioned we've gone from 54 to 45, and it will probably be that by the end of this harvest we will see another couple disappear, and there comes a point where you lose that critical mass.
Although we've been hop rubbing and yard rambling with Will on many occasions, it was the first time we got to meet his partner in crime, Peter Glendinning. Peter is a research agronomist, which means it's his job to look at ways to get better yields and better quality from crops. He specialised in hops for decades and runs Charles Fairham's breeding programme from a farming perspective, despite being deeply sceptical at the start.
When we started the programme, officially with Paul and Will at Fairham's, they said, right, what we want is the big citrus hit varieties that they grow in the States. And I said, no, this can't be done. We haven't got the sunshine, don't have the temperatures, we can't irrigate when we want to in the summer necessarily, we get too many vagaries of the climate and all the rest of it. So I said, no, well, I'll have a go. So then spent the next 10 years proving myself wrong. And was looking at a number of seedlings out of the Cascade family, and we found Jester. So then, following our noses, we took seeds from Jester, found Godiva, took seed from Godiva, found Harlequin. And with the variety Harlequin, it's a new threshold. We never expected in 1,000 years to find something as punchy and as rich in resin and aromas as Harlequin. So at the moment I'm concentrating on children and grandchildren of Harlequin for our aroma source. And we're not necessarily looking just for punchy aromas, we're looking for complexity of taste, because it's one thing to find a punchy aroma in a green hop, it's another thing for that to come through to a dry hop, it's another thing then for it to last long enough to give you the taste in the beer. And until we come up with, I don't imagine the scientists are ever going to be able to manage to do it, because they've actually had a good crack at it a few years ago, until you can come up with a recipe chemically of what you need to find in the hop to give you the taste that you want in the beer, we will carry on doing this rub and sniff in the field, rub and sniff in the storeroom, and then the brewing trials, and then of course we've got homework to taste.
Exactly, yeah, it's been absolutely magical to walk through this field, which, you know, somewhere in here could be, you know, the UK Citra or something, if Harlequin isn't. So it's incredibly
if it's
exciting.
Citra you want, but I
mean in terms of success, not in terms of aroma and flavour.
I think it's, you know, fairly one-dimensional as a hop flavour goes, but there we are.
After a few hours exploring the yard, getting aromas from the hop straight off the vine, and learning a little about the joys and frustrations of hop growing, once you're caught by the vine, you just can't stop sniffing.
Have you been scratched yet?
Oh, many times actually, yeah, I have. And on previous visits as well, so I think it's all stacking up.
Yeah, but you need to bleed.
Yeah. Oh, I need to bleed next, right?
Across the neck.
Okay.
Yeah.
That wasn't menacing at all. Brilliant. We headed back to the picking shed where dozens of brand new varieties were waiting to be appraised by me and Brad. But more importantly, Will and Buxton head brewer Rob and his brew team. The idea was for Buxton to find 4 exciting experimental hop varieties to take back to the brewery and brew single hop IPAs with. What followed was one of the most invigorating hours of my beer career, but I'm not sure how much help I was really being.
Yeah, that's the first brewing sample we've ever had of it. So what do you think?
Well, it smells like, I know this is very niche and weird, Iron Brew used to make little like gummy refresher bars.
Yeah.
Smells like that.
Yeah.
And what I find...
So like, yeah, I'm glad you're with me.
Yeah.
Berry brew.
Yeah. I don't even know what's in Iron Brew, but that's what it smells of.
Well, I don't think there's anything natural in Iron
Right,
Brew.
okay.
So...
Well, sue Charles Farron, not us.
Another one?
Yeah, please.
Big fluffy cones, yeah.
It's got a big fluffy aroma as well, yeah. I don't know what's happening, but now I'm thinking of Flumps, the marshmallows.
I was thinking of marshmallows, actually, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite lemony as well, but yeah.
I'll put that straight in a lovely German Pilsner or Czech Pilsner.
Oh, yeah.
Fruitcake. Kind of coffee-esque, like, I'll pop that in an ESB. Murray mints. Caramel lattes. But it's remarkable the diversity you're getting out of one.
Oh,
I mean, it's gone from coffee to Iron Brew to Flumps.
I like the Flumps one. I'm not so keen on that one.
I'm a caramel latte.
Yeah. Well, it might, you know, there's always a sort of caramel latte stout.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Who needs to add coffee to their beers? Now we've got whatever number that's going to be. You're doing the notes of the aromas.
Yeah, so I've still got last year's in here actually, so we're...
This is your hop notebook?
My little hop notebook.
Somebody needs to get you a bigger hop notebook.
Just make a couple of notes about the intensity, two or three of the key standouts from it, and then what we'll do is at the end we'll come back and we'll choose 4, ideally 4, so we make a nice little 4-pack, 4 of these varieties to test in a new beer.
I lost count of how many hops we'd sampled, and how Rob was going to whittle down the list of hops to 4 was beyond me.
You've got a nose immersed in hops right there, and your hands.
Yeah, absolutely green and
Look at
covered.
the difference, yeah.
And that's after a washing. No, it's been good. We came down. It's something we started a few years ago in terms of helping Ferrums with their development program. We've been doing a little bit of a single hop series for a while, where we took different American and English varieties, and some European varieties as well. And we were doing them as single hop, seeing how they performed, seeing how they look, and we got some really good results. And some of the ones we then sort of developed into some beers that have become a little bit more well known. So our Harlequin precursor has become Girl from Mars.
So you've really been, as a brewery, on this journey with them, with Farrums, as they were developing Harlequin and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and we found a couple of good ones this year. We did the hop eats last year, which was the first time we'd done a proper seed or sort of small plot developmental series. And then we're going to do that again today. So we've got four new hops that look pretty good, and we'll get those through to a beer early next year.
That's a good day if you found 4 new possible hops.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exciting.
While they had to work through their notes and come up with a recipe, we were just left to process the memories of beautiful sights, technical achievements, natural wonders, and of course, glorious aromas. Aromas that really carried through to the Cask IPA they sent to my local craft beer shop a few months later. So it's been about 6 months since we were down at Townland Farm with Will from Charles Fairham and of course Rob from Buxton. And what I have in front of me is pretty much the result of that day. So we sniffed, according to Rob's spreadsheet, brewers are unique animals. He sent me a spreadsheet with 57 different hop varieties that we sniffed on that day. It's got the variety codes, it's obviously got the farm, it's got whether we sniffed it from the bale or from the actual field itself. It's got notes on the aromas. It's got notes on the size, the shape, the colours of the hops, and then of course which ones they were going to use. So they chose 4 hops that day that they wanted to make their 4-pack with, and this is actually the super blend. So it's got all 4 of the hops, and the aromas that we're hoping to get from the hops and therefore from this beer include berry fruit, blueberry, juicy apricot, that's from 338, lemon, melon, apricot, coffee from 849, lime zest, fresh pine, apple crumble from CF340, and then the final one, 317, pine, red apple, slightly herbal and perfume. So there's a lot there. When we talked about complexity in the field and while we were talking to Will, there is a lot going on in these hops. Wow, that is simultaneously super nostalgic of lots of flavours I know and love from British beer, and entirely alien to what you'd expect from a British sort of hoppy blonde. It's the first thing you get is like orchard fruits, kind of pear, apple crumble, red apple skin, all those things that we saw that I read out in those last 2 hops. But it's also got a kind of, technically I would say it's probably geraniol, but a kind of rosewater, Turkish delight, really floral, sweet character to it that almost reminds me of being in that field, all the pastoral smells. When we were driving down the tractor, we went past an apple field. Oh, it's in lovely condition. Really sparkly, really bounces off the tongue. Beautifully balanced, loads of that kind of geraniol, that kind of Turkish delight thing coming through. A little bit of zippy kind of apple, maybe a little bit of lime. Something there, some kind of acidic fruit is really nice and making it crisp. It's really, really exciting because I think when people talk about the British hop industry and the crossbreeds that are being done at Charles Fairham, we're all expecting American hop aroma. And they were at pains in the field to point out to us that that's not necessarily what they're looking for. They're looking for the equivalent, but they're looking for the British equivalent. And that's going to be great for New England IPAs and all the big beers that we love. But it's also going to be brilliant for cask because what we've got here feels uniquely British. It feels like you couldn't make this anywhere else in the world. And it feels like these hops are beautiful, beautiful, bold, aromatic hops, but just perfect in like a 4.5% session-y cask blonde.
There's no denying that the British hop industry is still under serious threat. But every trip we take to the farms, and this one in particular, reassures us that there are super talented and passionate people doing everything they can to arrest its decline. The more brewers learn about the diversity and unique nature of British hops, the more drinkers come to appreciate its history and its newfound modern varieties, the more chance it has of pulling through. But part of its fate is entirely tied to the fate of cask beer. Whether we're talking bitters or New England IPAs, we need to get it in the hands of more people, in exciting modern places and contexts, to say that yes, cask is a link to our past, but that doesn't mean it belongs there, that it can't be part of and indeed continue to change the modern world.
Hey Beer Geeks, today we are in a pretty unusual location for a craft beer channel shoot, and also a pretty unusual location for Bradley Evans just in general, which is a football stadium. We're here at Lewes FC, which is down of course in Lewes, which you might know as the home of Harvey's brewery, one of my favourite breweries in the world, one of the brewers of the great, most iconic, most unique bitters. And this episode of Keep Cask Alive is all about the ways that we need to keep cask relevant, the way that cask brewers are keeping it relevant, and the incredible impact that historic and modern cask ale brewers can have on the world. And that starts here at Lewes FC and indeed at Brighton and Hove FC, and the way that Harvey's brewery helped build a community along with that other great community sport that is the beautiful game of football.
Let's start with a tour of what has to be one of the world's most beautiful breweries, with Harvey's joint managing director and head brewer Miles Jenner.
Harvey's of Lewes. What a historic building we're in.
Yeah, it's been on this site really as a brewery since 1838. Prior to that, he was brewing across the road. But Harvey set up his brewery here, and obviously the river on one side, barge transport bringing up grain and coal. Built by William Bradford, very famous brewery architect, and you'll see a very fine example of his work at Hook Norton and many other breweries that have been. And it was a gravity brewery, so it is a heritage site. You know, it's very much, you know, as it was operating when it was first built, and we've maintained those principles throughout. One of our claims to notoriety is that we get flooded periodically, and in 2000 you'll see up here the level of flood water in 2000, which was quite dramatic.
So I'd have been submerged, fully submerged.
Absolutely.
And so were you.
Basically, our loss adjuster came down, looked at the devastation and said that we would be out of production for at least 3 months, if not 6. And in the event, we turned it round in 9 days. So we were very fortunate. We had a lot going for us. Okay, so we're in the malt room, and really unchanged since it was built in 1881. No silos. We're a Grade 2 listed building, and you can't do much to it. And we're on sack intake, as you can see. And normally this room would be full of sacks, and it would be about 1 week's production.
Really? Full of sacks, 1 week production?
Yeah. Mainly Marisotta malt at Harvey's. We use a little bit of Plumage Archer. Clear choice malt, where we're doing our Pilsner and other beers of a different genre.
And it's all manually brought in?
All manually brought in on
These look like they've stood the test of time. Look at that, beautiful.
Well, we offered some more modern ones, but people get fond of them, and that they work well.
Wow. What a beautiful room.
Yeah, it's quite unusual in a brewery today to see hop bays, you know, with whole leaf hops.
Yeah.
We're brewing with Sussex, Kent and Surrey hops because that's where we send our beer, within a 60-kilometre radius. And we're placing contracts for our hops 4 years in advance. And they are all aroma hops: Goldings, Fuggles, Progress, Bramling Cross.
So you'd never switch to pellets at this point?
On the plant we've got,
Yeah.
I think it would change the nature of the beer dramatically. I mean, the whole thing for us is that we are based on authenticity, you know, spring water from our own well, whole leaf hops, copper vessels for brewing, open fermentation. I mean, a number of things which lend themselves to having a system that is basically unchanged over a long period of time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we do things better. We're far more aware today. We've got better cleaning agents, and you can stay on top of it. But in principle, we are brewing as we have done for over a century. Sorry, I'm literally nattering away, but do chip in and interrupt me. Going back to early 1980s, we just had the one brewing line with the smash tun, which dates back to about 1930. The second line was put in 1985, and we had to expand on Bradford's original facade when we put that in, and we completely reproduced his designs. The windows were specially cast from an old patent of Morris of Lewes, who were iron founders in the town. Bricks carved and tinted to match the original, so the whole thing looked as if it had been there from the start. And we got given a Civic Trust Award for our efforts, and 6 months later got made a Grade 2 listed building. Up until this time we hadn't been. One of the quirks of officialdom, we're the only 1985 listed building in the country. But it is a focal point of Lewes. We're rather irreverently known locally as Lewes Cathedral.
Yeah.
You see people bow to it from Cliff Bridge occasionally. And
I tell you, from the bridge, it has a cathedral-like quality.
It does. And
it's very impressive.
How are you doing? 2 coppers, stainless steel copper and a copper copper. And you'd be forgiven for thinking that that one is very much younger than this one. In fact, we acquired that one second hand in 1976 from Gray's Brewery in Chelmsford.
Yeah.
And this one I had made in 1999. And
No way.
Yeah. And we're very keen to keep copper because it's an important trace element for yeast, can act as a coenzyme, and we didn't want to denude the brewery of copper plant. It is part of the authenticity of the brew, and I think, you know, if you strip copper out of a brewery of this nature, then the beer will change. How are you doing? So the fermenting room actually predates the Victorian brewery, and this has obviously grown over the years. The room holds 1,038 barrels to capacity, and there have been occasions at the peak of our sort of production periods where we have actually filled every vessel. So it is a very traditional means of fermentation, and unchanged again over the centuries.
Harvey's brewery and its processes may not have changed much in the last 50 years, but clearly the world around it has. Seeing a historic independent business in the centre of a town is rare enough these days without it being a brewery. But Mars has already hinted at the secret to the brewery's success.
Rather irreverently known locally as Lewes Cathedral.
It's the way it's become a part of the community here, entwining itself in Lewes culture and lore over centuries. To learn more about that, we visited another historic Lewes institution. Founded in a pub and nearing its 140th birthday, Lewes Football Club's men's team now play in the 7th tier of English football, and its women's team in the 3rd. Perhaps more importantly, it's owned by the fans and in 2017 became the world's first football club to pay its men and women the same. As a sponsor of the club, that's partly down to Harvey's financial support. Brad and I headed down to the ground to meet Bambi Burke's head of hospitality to learn more.
Lewes Football Club was formed in 1885. Before that, it used to be a cricket club. In 1885, at the Royal Oak, just up the road, the kind of decision was made to create this football club. So we're coming up to the 140th birthday this year, which is fantastic.
Yeah. I wonder if they were drinking Harvey's beer as they came up with the idea. Maybe.
We'll have to check with Harvey's. Do you reckon? That could be quite likely, actually.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible, you know, that most of the Premier League clubs, one of which we're going to visit later, is doesn't have that kind of heritage. And you guys are here in the centre of Lewes still, not just building the community, but I guess leading it to some extent by introducing women's football, and you offer them equal pay as well. One of the first, possibly only club still to do that?
It's not the only club now, but it was at the time. So in 2017, we introduced the Equality FC, equally splitting our resources between men and women, and we're the first in the world to do so. We believe very strongly in, welcoming people who don't think football is for them, perhaps. So, lots of women who feel like football has traditionally been a men's game.
Certainly the stadiums themselves can be very sort of gendered spaces.
Well, when you walk in here, you get a breastfeeding sign as the first thing you see when you walk through the turnstile. Right. So we do definitely try to be as inclusive as possible. Yes, obviously by enabling women to feel completely empowered by being here on the pitch and off the pitch. I think that's really, really key. We partner up with people who believe the same things we do, want to pioneer the same things we do. Certainly the partnership with Harvey's has, brought together two of the oldest institutions within Lewes, and Harvey's have helped us deliver some of the biggest kind of changes to be more sustainable. They're very sustainable. We align in that so well. They've created some amazing designs to deliver our reusable cup scheme, which started at the beginning of this season. So, they really dig in and help us do both what is right for us both as kind of long-standing businesses within Lewes, but also being the hub of somewhere. I guess you have to be the place people find fun and enjoyment and a real kind of connection. I don't know if you felt it when you walked in, but certainly every time I walk in, when I get up to the stand at the top there and look over the pitch, I even talking about it, I get goosebumps. I'm getting goosebumps now, but Yeah, you get the sense of kind of belonging.
It's another way in which beer and breweries are very similar to football, in that it is a place that lots of people come together and all feel hopefully safe together. And the work that you're doing here to improve the gender balance and the diversity is really important, making sure that feeling that I get every time I walk in is the same for everybody. And it's wonderful that Harvey's have managed to be a part of that for another long-standing part of the community.
Despite its amazing work, Lewes FC is not actually the most famous club that Harvey's supports. That honour goes to Brighton and Hove Albion, a club that 15 years ago didn't even have a stadium but is now a Premier League club. Despite its wild success, it's kept a special relationship with its closest brewery, which supported it through thick and thin, as I found out while talking to Harvey's Bob Trim, who had invited us to a game.
So Bob, I understand you are a lifelong Brighton and Hove fan.
Yep. So I went to my first game at the Golston Ground when I was 8 years old. Bit of an experience going into the away end. But
you were in the away end?
Yeah, so my brother-in-law got a ticket from somebody at work, asked me if I wanted to go. As an 8-year-old, you think, great, go and see a football match. And then when we got there, he went, well, I'm in there and you're in this stand and I'll see you there after the game. So a bit of an initiation.
Baptism of fire.
Yeah, it was a cup game against Chelsea. So,
right. Against Chelsea? A cup game against Chelsea?
Is,
so what we're experiencing...
so you're going to witness that tomorrow. So
there you go.
Bit of synergy.
A couple of decades on.
Yeah.
So tell me about like the history of Brighton Football Club, because my understanding of it is that for a long time they didn't even have a stadium.
That's right. Yeah. So for years they were at the Golston Ground in Hove, which is the game I went to. Used to get 30,000 people standing in there, crammed in for games. And then that was sold, which has now become a retail park. So they were literally sort of homeless, ground shared with Gillingham, which is
not near.
No, bit of a mission for fans to go to. But again, the stalwarts went up there every week, and then there was a campaign to get the team back to Sussex.
And you brewed a beer specifically, was it to promote that campaign?
Yeah, it was to promote the campaign, so it was to bring Brighton back to Sussex. So we did a beer to get that message out there. I don't know how much we contributed to that, but it worked. We're back in Sussex, and fantastic stadium built in 2011. Yeah, from day one they approached us and said, we're looking to get Cask beer in there, which was very unusual for a football club. I remember the first game, there was a friendly against Tottenham. Sun was blazing away, and I went down there and helped him out in the cellar on that day, and it was just like, nobody expected it. I walked out of the cellar as the catering manager, sort of walked the other way, and we just looked at each other and said, this is madness. So, and literally, I can't remember how much beer we sent there, but we had a lot of beer down there that day, but still had to get for the second half. Had a fleet of taxis come to the brewery, pick up beer, and literally brought it down in taxis. And we were bringing bright beer out the back of the taxis and putting it on for the second half. And just tremendous. And it's gone from strength to strength.
On a sellout crowd, it's 32,000 people.
Yeah.
How many pints of Cask ale is?
So on the Cask side, we're doing about 8,500 pints a game.
I mean, this is why we came, because I just think it's so uniquely British that you could have a nearly 200-year-old brewery. Serving beer at a decade-old stadium that happens to have a team that is in the Premier League and has done very well for the last couple of years in the Premier League. So, it's the equivalent of all these teams that people know of the Chelseas of the world or the Man Uniteds having their local historic brewery on tap. And I just, it's both quintessentially British to have football and Cask beer together, but also very unusual, sadly, for that to actually happen because of the big guys coming in.
We'd done enough talking. Now it was time for some beautiful pints and the beautiful game, and in Brad's case, his first ever trip to a sports stadium.
You can tell from Brad's face, and indeed tone, that he's very excited about this particular fourth round of the FA Cup.
First we went to Brighton to soak up the atmosphere and check our pre-match fitness, then jumped on a train with the supporters to the Amex, where Brighton were taking on Chelsea in the fourth round of the FA Cup.
So here we go. This is Brad Evans' first ever competitive sports match, let alone football.
Yeah. I've never been to a sports stadium in my life. I've managed to avoid it at this point.
And finally, I've dragged you here, but mostly I think you're exclusively here because this is, for tonight, pretty much the biggest real ale pub in the world.
That's what we've been told in a very Jeremy Clarkson manner. Yeah.
And the beer is exclusively Harvey's, which is very exciting. So we're going to have a couple of pints of that, and hopefully see the seagulls
fly.
Oh, I was going to go with flock together. That's much much better. We'll see you in there. There we saw just how popular Harvey's beer was with the fans. How given the opportunity, so many of them would choose to drink local and drink cask. Harvey's Best was flying out of the bar where we were filming, keeping one man hand pumping almost constantly. You can kind of see why serving cask in these locations is a rarity, but the response was clearly worth it. From the main concourse, we headed up to the more relaxed Harvey's Lounge to process what we'd seen and see if we could teach Brad the offside rule. After numerous failed attempts, it was game time. Here we go then, lads. Up the gulls. Not sure that's the right. Up the seagulls. You can tell from Brad's face and indeed tone that he's very excited about this particular fourth round of the FA Cup.
Most people would be, I'm not sure.
You can't even fake it for the camera. During half-time, the Harvey's Lounge and concourses were full of Harvey drinkers once again. And with the match finely balanced and nerve-wracking, people seemed a little more thirsty. So it's half-time here at the Amex Stadium, but I think the real winner, whoever comes out on top today, is going to be beer. It's a truly incredible thing to see, Harvey's up on the billboards, the digital billboards halfway up. It's incredible to see so many people down in the concourses enjoying genuine, beautiful, historic cask ale while at a Premier League football game. I never thought that kind of confluence of British culture could really happen, and it's really magical to see the enthusiasm people have both for football and indeed for cask ale, which are two things that we need to get behind, that bring people together, that create this huge sense of community here in Brighton and indeed all across the UK. So it's been an absolutely brilliant day out. Massive thanks to Harvey's for having us, and hopefully in the second half the Seagulls can send us flying.